Bonjour tout le monde. Aujourd'hui, nous apprenons l'imparfait. Allons-y. So, our starting point, our point de départ. You've already learned to one form of the past tense, the passé composé. Now we're going to learn another form of the past tense, which is the imparfait, or the imperfect. So the imparfait is pretty easy to learn in terms of form. It's a very regular form of verb, but it's kind of tricky because we don't have anything that's exactly the same in English. So let's look at several ways that the imperfect can be translated into English. So, Hakim buvait beaucoup de thé. So this can mean several things. It can mean Hakim drank a lot of tea, as in once upon a time, Hakim drank a lot of tea. Hakim used to drink a lot of tea. Hakim would drink a lot of tea. Or Hakim was drinking a lot of tea when something else happened. So let's look at another example. Nina chantait sous la douche tous les matins. So it could mean Nina sang in the shower every morning. Nina used to sing in the shower every morning. Nina would sing in the shower every morning, or Nina was singing in the shower every morning. So the important thing with the imparfait is not to think about how you would say it in English. The important thing with the imparfait is to know when in French you're supposed to use it. So there are certain situations in French when you use the imparfait, and that's what we're going to talk about. So when do you use the imparfait? The imparfait is used to talk about actions that took place repeatedly or habitually during an unspecified period of time. So, for example, je passais l'hiver à Lausanne. I spent winters in Lausanne. I'm not specifying when exactly this was. It's just something I used to do repeatedly or habitually. Vous m'écriviez tous les jours. So I'm not talking about this one time when you wrote to me. I'm talking about this habit you used to have. You used to write to me every day, or you would write to me every day. Nous achetions des fleurs au marché. So I'm not talking about a specific time that we bought flowers at the market. I'm saying, we used to buy flowers at the market. It was a habitual thing. It was something we did over and over again. Il vendait des meubles. So there wasn't this one time when he sold a piece of furniture. This is something he did habitually. He did it for a living. He used to sell furniture. Il vendait des meubles. So things that happened repeatedly or habitually during an unspecified period of time. It's also used a lot in descriptions, especially with the verbs être and avoir. So for example, il faisait beau. We're describing what the weather was like. It was nice. Les enfants étaient mignons. The children were cute. That's just how they were. We're describing them. La maison était en désordre. The house was messy. Il y avait des touristes partout. There were tourists everywhere. We're describing the scene here. So with descriptions and with habitual or repeated actions. Another situation where you use the imparfait is with interrupted actions. Nous parlions de mon ami quand il est arrivé. So the action nous parlions is in the imparfait, and it's interrupted by our friend arriving. So we were talking about my friend when he showed up. So nous parlions is imparfait, And then the action that interrupts it is in the passé composé. Quand il est arrivé. Nous parlions de mon ami quand il est arrivé. Let's look at another example. Claire étudiait quand Jean-Marc lui a téléphoné. So Claire was studying when Jean-Marc called her. So Jean-Marc calling her interrupts the studying. So étudier is in the imparfait because that's the action that gets interrupted. Claire étudiait quand Jean-Marc lui a téléphoné. So one tricky thing about the imparfait is sometimes students get it mixed up with the imperative, which we learned in French 101. So the way I always remember it is imparfait means imperfect. So we're talking about things that were in the course of happening or things that were happening on a regular basis. We're not talking about this one time we did something and it was done. So imparfait, think about still in progress. The imperative comes from the same word as imperial. And what is the empire always telling you to do? They're bossing you around. So the imperative is for bossing people around, just like the empire. So, how do we form the imparfait? So good news, it's a simple tense. It does not require an auxiliary verb. So don't have to worry about that. No helping verbs. It's just a simple tense, one word. So the first thing we're going to do to form the imparfait is to find the stem, or the radical. So to find the stem in the imparfait, you take the new form of the present tense and drop the ONS. So for example, parler, the new form would be nous parlons. We drop the ONS and we have nous parle. Another verb, finir. The new form of finir is nous finissons. We drop the ONS and we have FINISS. Let's look at one more example. Boire. The new form of boire is nous buvons. Drop the ONS and we have BUV. So now we've found the stem of our verb and it's time to add the endings. So we have je parlais, AIS. Tu parlais, AIS. On parlait, AIT. Nous parlions, IONS. Vous parliez, IEZ. Elle parlait, AIENT. So AIS, AIS, AIT, IONS, IEZ, AIENT. And the parler, that AIENT just makes an E sound. And the great news about the imparfait is it's one of the most regular forms of verbs. There are very few exceptions to the way it works. So we already looked at parler. All you had to do was find the new form, add the endings. Finir, we found the new form, it's finis. And we just add the same endings, AIS, AIS, AIT, IONS, IEZ, AIENT. Vendre, same thing. New form is nous vendons, so VEND. And our endings are AIS, AIS, AIT, IONS, IEZ, AIENT. And boire. The new form would be buvons. We drop the ONS and we have BUV. And we have the same endings. AIS, AIS, AIT, IONS, IEZ, AIENT. And here are just a few examples. Il faisait chaud. It was hot. Nous parlions au prof. We were talking to the professor. So, the imparfait is one of the most regular forms of verbs. So with most verbs, all you have to do, drop the ONS from the new form, add these same endings, and you're good to go. Let's talk about a few exceptions, a few tricky things. So, verbs that end in GER, like manger or déménager. You're going to add an E before all the endings in the imparfait except for the nous and vous forms. So why would we do that? So, for example, tu déménageais, but nous déménagions. Why would we do that? If you guessed pronunciation, you're right. So if this G were followed by an A, it would make a hard G sound, and it would be tu déménaguer, and that would just sound gross. So we add this E, and that makes it a soft G. So it's tu déménageais. Here, in the nous form, the G is followed by an I, so it's already making a soft G sound. So it's already nous déménagions. So we don't need to change the spelling. The other tricky situation like this is verbs that end in CER. So what we're going to do there is in all the forms except the nous and vous form, we're going to change the C to a cedilla. And this is for the same reason. We want to keep that soft C. We don't want it to become a hard C. So, les invités commençaient. We don't want to have to say les invités commençaient. So, we're going to make this a cedilla. Les invités commençaient. But the vous form, vous commenciez, this if an I comes after the C, it's already a soft C. So we don't need to change it. Vous commenciez. So here are some examples of this principle in action. Mes parents voyageaient en Afrique. So we added an E here and we keep that soft G sound. Voyager. My parents used to travel to Africa. But if you have a vous form, vous mangiez toujours des pâtes le soir. Did you always have pasta for dinner? So mangier, that I makes the G soft, so you don't need to change it. Vous mangiez toujours des pâtes le soir. Let's look at another example. À quelle heure commençait l'école? So we wouldn't want to have to say commencer. So we would have to use a cedilla here. À quelle heure commençait l'école? But on the nous side, it's followed by an I, which means it's a soft C already. So we don't need to change the C here. Nous commencions notre journée à 8 heures. All right, so we have one little pronunciation quirk in our imparfait. One other thing to watch out for is that if a verb ends in IER, it's going to have two I's in the nous and vous forms, and it's going to look weird, but it'll be right. So vous skiez dans les Alpes en janvier. So you have our root here is, so our verb is skier, and our root is going to be S-K-I, and our ending is going to be I-E-Z. So we wind up with two I's right next to each other. Vous skiez dans les Alpes en janvier. Let's look at another example. Nous étudions parfois jusqu'à minuit. We studied until midnight sometimes. So the verb here is étudier. So our root, our stem is going to be E, accent aigu, T, U, D, I. And our ending is going to be I-O-N-S. So we wind up with two I's right next to each other. It looks weird, but it's right, I swear. Now, there's one irregular verb. This is the verb that's actually irregular, and it is être. So it has the same endings as all the other verbs in the imperfect, but the root is E, accent aigu, T. J'étais, tu étais, on était, nous étions, vous étiez, ils ou elles étaient. And let's look at a few examples of être in the imparfait. La cuisine était à côté du salon. The kitchen was next to the living room. Les toilettes étaient au rez-de-chaussée. The restrooms were on the ground floor. Étiez-vous heureux avec Francine? Were you happy with Francine? Nous étions dans le jardin. We were in the garden. And so if you look at these with these verbs with être and the imparfait, they're almost all descriptions. And être in the past usually is in the imparfait. So you're going to see être and avoir in the imparfait a lot. So take a look at some of these expressions. We already looked at some expressions to talk about the weather. So it's just going to be il, and then you're going to have the verb in the imparfait when you're talking about the weather. So especially when you're describing a scene, you're describing what things were like, you'll use the imparfait when you're talking about the weather. So il pleuvait chaque matin. Il neigeait parfois au printemps. And notice that here, this is one of those ones with where the G is followed by AIT, and so you want to make it an E after there to keep that soft G sound. Il neigeait. E-A-I-T. Then there's the expression il y a. So in the imparfait, it'll be il y avait deux lits et une lampe. There were two beds and a lamp. And then there's the expression il faut. And we remember that the expression il faut means it is necessary to. Il fallait, so the imperfect of il faut would be il fallait. Il fallait payer le loyer. Question. So I recommend that you find someone to practice this with, just to practice speaking out loud. You can, if you know one of your fellow students, and you can get in touch with them, and you can either work face-to-face or FaceTime, then that would be a great way to practice this question. Donc, question. comment étais-tu quand tu étais petit ou petite? Et qu'est-ce que tu faisais? So, quand j'étais petite, I'll answer for myself. When I was little. So, comment étais-tu? What were you like? Quand j'étais petite, j'étais un peu difficile, timide et intelligente. So we have j'étais is in the imparfait because we're talking about what I was like when I was a child. And the answer for the second part of the question is we're going to have verb conjugated in the imparfait. So we're talking about what I used to do. Qu'est-ce que tu faisais? What did you used to do? We're talking about habitual actions here. So, exemple, je faisais des blagues, je jouais avec mes poupées, j'embêtais mes parents, I annoyed my parents, je mangeais des carottes, je buvais du jus d'orange, etc. So I encourage you to find someone in the class with whom you can practice. And if you can't find someone in the class with whom you can practice, then go ahead and take a minute and try practicing answering these questions out loud, just to work on your pronunciation. So for today's activity, you're going to respond to the questions from the previous slide in the imparfait. You're going to respond in complete sentences in the discussion below. So, comment étais-tu quand tu étais petit? And you're going to use at least 3 adjectives to describe what you were like when you were little. Et qu'est-ce que tu faisais quand tu étais petit ou petite? And you're going to use at least 3 activities. And again, you're going to use l'imparfait for all your verbs in this activity. Bon courage et à la prochaine!